didn't win a whole lot.
Yeah.
so so just in conjunction with that, it was just like, hey, you know what? Maybe you're living for wins instead of living for the Lord.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, keeping Jesus in the sports conversation. Here's your host for today's show, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
Jemal Singleton, welcome back to Sports Spectrum. This is a longer conversation that we can have today. We had you for like 5 minutes back at the Super Bowl, so it's good to see you.
Absolutely not quite as hectic as it was the last time we talked as well.
It
It
was
was a little bit
loud. It
excitement. Yeah, it was loud. It was crowded.
was
It was
dark.
interesting. I think we were up against a railing or something like that. But no, I'm glad to be back and get a chance to talk with you again.
Absolutely. I knew I wanted to have you back on, no matter what happened, Super Bowl wise, just to go in a little bit longer of a conversation, a little bit deeper into your story. So I'm glad that we have you back on today. Let's start with probably where we should start in every conversation with the Lord. Let's start with Christ. How has He been impacting you recently? Like, what's He been impressing on your heart, the Lord, as we talk today here in the spring of 2023?
My faith journey is, I think, probably similar to some. I've always kind of been around faith. My started growing up in my early years. Was involved was in Catholicism, was kind of coming from there. So I've always kind of had a relationship. Well, really, I knew of God was probably a better way to put it.
Yeah.
And just as I've gotten older, and especially even more recent, probably last 6 or 7 years, I kind of took that next step. And I think it started, I knew the word, I heard the word, I listened to the word, but
Yeah.
I was never a doer of the word. And it was one of those things that I think in the past 6, 7 years, I started listening and then I started acting. So I started walking in my faith, not just talking, not just hearing. And it really, to be honest, has changed my life, changed my career path, changed kind of the place that I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And most of it is simply that is, I can read the Bible every day, but if I'm not, putting into practice those things, it's like the sower of the seed.
Mhm.
It's one of those things that it was falling on concrete with me before. And
Yeah.
now I think it's fallen on fertile land and I'm starting to use and try to live the ways that Jesus has told us to live. So that's a big part just currently in my lifetime is now I consider myself a doer of the word and I try to do that every single day and live out my faith, not just listen to it.
So 6, 7 years ago, what happened with whatever you're allowed to share or willing to share?
Yeah.
What was the pivot moment for you to just decide to go all in?
Well, it was a big transition phase for me, and really kind of a piece of it started before that with the birth of my daughter. I've got a 10-year-old, and to be honest, we were a little bit older in our relationship and our marriage when we had her, and we really didn't think we could even have kids. I mean, it was one of those. I like to say we weren't trying not to have kids. So there was nothing that we were doing. We just decided to put it into God's hands and really kind of thought wasn't going to happen. We weren't going to take the extra steps. We weren't going to do the fertility. We weren't going to do all that. We just felt, you know what, let's put it in God's hands. And if I'm being really honest, it was a very low point in my life and probably a little bit low point in our marriage.
Yeah.
And God said, you know what, I think you guys are ready. I think you guys need to be parents and be fruitful. And he made that. So it was one of those things we not our miracle baby or anything like that, but it was something that, just came at a time in our lives that we needed that. And
Yeah.
it kind of changed it. And then, it's still, I'm stubborn. I'm a old football head guy. So I'm stubborn. So yeah, okay, I heard you. And probably really hadn't quite made that next step again. And then as I trend basically got into the NFL, and that's kind of when it happened. There were some tough times. I went from kind of college playing career was pretty successful, winning. College coaching career was winning, and got to the NFL and didn't win a whole lot.
Yeah.
so just in conjunction with that, it was just like, hey, you know what? Maybe you're living for wins instead of living for the Lord, and really kind of made that transition. It is amazing that when I think when he feels you're capable of handling certain blessings, then he gives them to you. And I think that's part of just being sound in your faith and strong in your faith and living out those words. So I don't know, it's kind of a short story long there, but
No,
a lot of things.
I can relate only because we walked through some infertility and trying to wait for our child to be born, and we had our daughter. I do call her my miracle child when she was born in 2004. She's a lot older now. She's 19 years old. But I do think something changes in our relationship with God when we become parents. Did you see that? Like becoming a dad, and suddenly you can almost see the Father. You can almost see the relationship that He desires to have with us in the way that we can have that relationship with our own kids.
Absolutely. I mean, I know I lied to myself for years and years and years that, I don't need a biological child. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I can be good and do different things, but I think when you get that, and I tell people all the time, as one of my friends, even had said, you used to say you didn't want kids. You didn't have, I was like, well, I lied. All right, let's be honest. That was the worst thing I could have ever said. And
Yeah.
it is, you get that. And then you start to get what that relationship is with a father and a son, father and a daughter. And really you kind of try to live that way throughout when you are a father. And it changes you. It changes your priority in a way that you just don't understand until it kind of happens. And I was one of those guys that didn't really understand what it meant and what it could mean. And
Yeah.
then when it happened, it was like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
And it's truly been a blessing ever since her birth. And I think a lot of that was just a lot of prayer, and part of being, with father is really open my eyes to what that relationship is that I can have with Jesus and with the Lord.
Yeah. How about how that changed you as a coach after you kind of decided to be a doer, right? You said the wins didn't come right away when you got to the NFL, but that's around the same time, it looks like, if I'm doing my math here, that you decided to kind of be all in and be a doer of the word and kind of say, yes, I'm all in, God. What changed for you as far as how you went about coaching and how you saw yourself as a
Yeah.
coach?
There was a lot of things that I kind of changed. I really kind of put my spiritual life side by side with my fitness life. I was probably in the worst shape of my life that I'd ever been in when my first year in the NFL. And I changed that. I changed how I was eating. I changed music that I was listening to. I became very strict in what I allowed to get into my body. And I just was going back to the scripture of above all else, guard your heart.
Yes.
So I started guarding my heart from things. And I think then it opened me up to, what? I want to be a servant as a coach. I want to be a servant coach. I want to help whoever the player is, whoever the players are, become the best version of themselves they possibly can. And I felt the only way that I could truly do that was be a great husband, be a great father, and then be a coach to them. And I think they can see through my walk. People are going to listen more to your actions than they ever are to your words.
Yeah.
And I really tried to change that mindset, and was fortunate enough at the time to be coaching one of the all-time greats. I was fortunate to coach Frank Gore
Yep.
at the Colts for 2 years and to start off. And I really felt that even during those losses, if I could come in and walk in the same way, not down in the dumps, and be a consistent person when I was with them, it would make me a better coach. And it did. I really do think that because of that, I was able to handle myself that way, build great relationships with the players, doing everything I could to help them succeed. So it was really how my coaching style definitely changed throughout that. Still coaching the same fundamentals, the same techniques, but how I coached them was definitely different.
That's good. He is Jemal Singleton. He's joining us here on Sports Spectrum from the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year was such a special year, obviously. When we met, we were getting ready, or you were getting ready, and I was getting ready to watch it and cover it, and you were getting ready to coach in the Super Bowl. It didn't end the way you wanted, obviously, but I'm curious how long it might have taken, and maybe it was immediately, but how long it might have taken for you to find sort of the gratitude, right? And the blessing within going through last season, even after it didn't end the way that you wanted it to end.
It's I actually have a story. Imagine that, a coach with
Yeah.
a story.
Yeah.
So before I got here to the Philadelphia Eagles, I was with the Cincinnati Bengals. And to your point, and just, I don't know, it's just what I didn't feel that's where I was supposed to be. Didn't feel that's where I was called to be. came up on the end of a contract and decided, you know what, I think we need to make a move. We need to go somewhere else. Decided to do that, ended up roundabout way, ended up here and left them. Well, it was basically the very next year that
Yeah,
I left the Cincinnati Bengals that the Cincinnati Bengals went to the Super Bowl.
that's right.
So, so yeah, as you can imagine, there could be a whole world of emotion. Man, I should have stayed. What was I thinking? What had I done? They reached the pinnacle of our coaching profession, and I could have had an opportunity to do it, but I decided to be here. But the amazing thing was there was a huge calm. Like I wasn't upset. I wasn't distraught. I wasn't like, man, what have I done? Because I don't know, part of it was because I made that decision through prayer. It wasn't that I just decided we're leaving. It was just a feeling, and I was seeking God at the time to help me with this decision, and felt He was saying, "Yeah, you're right. It's time to move on." And I'll never forget. I'm in the weight room, and our general manager walks in. It's when Cincinnati's doing the Super Bowl. He's like, "Man, Jamal, do you have any regrets about coming here?" And I'll never. And it just I said, "Absolutely not." I
Yeah.
said, if God wanted me there in Cincinnati in that Super Bowl, He would have put me there. That's where I would be. And then lo and behold, literally a year later,
Hmm.
we're playing in the Super Bowl at a place here. So for me, just the blessing came well before the game, and just the experience of like, you know what, hey, maybe you're ready to go to the Super Bowl. Maybe you're ready for whatever the blessings that He wanted to give me, and just being able to get to that point, having that calm and truly trusting in God. And at the end of the day, and coaches don't want to say this, but at the end of the day, my victory in this profession is not going to be by the trophies I've won. It's not going to be by how many Super Bowls or Pro Bowl players. It's going to be about the relationship that I've made with the young men that I've been able to coach.
Yeah.
If I can win in that room with my position group and those players, I mean, yes, I want to win the Super Bowl. Yes, I want to get the greatest, but I do know that there's a greater victory out there, and it starts with the young men that I get to work with.
That's beautiful. I know last year was such a special year spiritually for the team, and talking to Pastor Ted Winsley, who's your team chaplain. And he told me in so many ways, I think last year was his first year also working with the coaches. And so this was, your second year with the team, but I'm just curious what last year was like for you growing spiritually, and kind of this breakthrough, as I think Pastor Ted Winsley referred to it as, just in terms of Bible studies. What was that like last year, connecting spiritually with the team chaplain, but also among some of your fellow coaches?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, that's part of it. When you coach in the NFL, I think with any football you coach in, it gets tough
Yeah.
to have those days. Like Sundays, well, we play games on Sundays.
Yeah.
And it's always awesome when we can have church. So we have our chapel services on Saturday nights before the game, or the night before the game if it's a different day. And then we have our Bible studies on Saturday. So the opportunity to get the word right through Bible study and through a group of guys that they know what you're going through, right? They're in that same building. You spend more time with your coaches than you do with your family during the season, to be honest.
Yeah.
And just having, Pastor Ted there sharing the word with us daily so we could study that. And then having those evenings where we go to church, I really felt it gave me an opportunity to still connect, to still have that fellowship with players. And it's great. You start to listen to other people talk and kind of where they are in their faith. And you get a feel when those guys are in the room. There's certain conversations that you start to have outside of Bible study and outside of chapel with fellow followers of Christ. So just being able to connect that way. Pastor Ted was awesome this year with the services, and on the road when we were out on the road, we had some guest speakers every now and then as well. Just being able to continue and be in your faith and in the Word, even though you're in a hectic job. It's you could still get a chance to put God first.
That's good. Did I read that you were born in Turkey? Is that right?
Yes, sir. I was. So I'm a military brat. So
Yeah.
my dad was in the Air Force, retired in 20 years. So I was born in Turkey. I have no recollection of Turkey. We moved when I was very, very young. We moved to England. My mother was British, so we spent about 10 years of my life in England on separate tours. And so I traveled all over the world growing. Then I went to the Air Force Academy for school. So I did my own military stint, and really the parallels between coaching and being in the military are so similar.
I was
It's
going to ask you
amazing.
that. Like, it had to have set you up in a way
Oh,
because there's no, the NFL is not for long, right? But for
yeah.
coaches, it really can be, what's the next job? You've been in 3 or 4 different jobs over the past 6, 7 years. That's a lot like the military, right? Moving around.
It's that. I remember as a kid growing up, we'd get that itch at about the 3 year point. We knew we were going to be going somewhere. So
Hmm.
I've been moving my whole life. My poor daughter, she's 10. She's been to quite a few places. I was like, well, you're kind of growing up like your dad grew up. Just you stayed stateside the whole time.
Yeah.
But it was, and it was a great thing for me. Just I've seen things overseas that, maybe you just see in books. I've lived in places that
Yeah.
were way different. So it to me, it was a great experience. It's allowed me, I think, really when you transition into different staffs. I've been the new kid in school a lot,
Hmm.
right? So you come to
Absolutely.
how do you make friends? How do you connect with people? And I think that's been a valuable lesson that I've learned through my growing up as a military brat and then my time is in the military and now my time coaching.
Yeah. You played running back in college with Air Force. I'm curious, at what point in that journey did you realize that God was directing your steps towards becoming a coach? Did you know that right when you were done playing, that coaching was the next step?
No,
No.
not at all. Not at all. So, like they say, his plan versus your plan.
Yeah.
I had a much different plan for my life when I was an Air Force guy. I was pilot qualified. I was going to be a pilot, and my whole time at the Air Force Academy, that was going to be after I graduate, pilot training, become a pilot, do all this stuff. That was the goal. So when I first graduated, my first job as a second lieutenant was I got to coach down at the Air Force Academy Prep School, which is right there on campus,
Yeah.
and was starting my introductory to flight training. We're just learning to fly Cessna. It's just a little intro thing before we went on to our, normal pilot training. Well, I enjoyed flying. I enjoyed it. It was kind of cool, kind of neat, but I fell in love with coaching. And it was just, I was like, I don't know how I can live without football being a part of my life, without this being, I just I don't see it. So again, lo and behold, I made a pretty drastic career change, which I laugh because it literally kind of took an act of Congress to give up my pilot slot and decide not to do that on the whim and the hope that at some point I may get to coach. There's no guarantee. I had to still
Right.
had a 5 year Air Force commitment. Was still going to have that. I could be out of the game for 5 or 6 years and never have the opportunity to get back into it. But things just worked out. I spent that first year prep school, fell in love with coaching, knew that's something I definitely wanted to do. Had to change career fields in the Air Force and went and did that, and then was fortunate enough to get back to the Air Force Academy. I actually came back as an executive officer, as a glorified administrative assistant for the athletic director.
Yeah.
And during that time, my head coach was still coaching and kind of finagled a way to get me down on the coaching. So I became a military coach for a few years, then was able to get out of the Air Force, stay there at the Air Force Academy and stay on as a full-time coach, and stayed when the new head coach came in. So really my Air Force career led to my coaching career and all that stuff. So just was thankful. It could have went the total opposite direction, but I think this was something I was called and led to do. And I think with God's help, he
Yeah.
put some things in my path that made me see, oh, maybe I should go this route. And I did. So he's been very blessed. He's blessed me for quite some time now.
Did you think the NFL was even on the radar at all? Because you were at Oklahoma State for 4 years and Arkansas,
Yes.
and then the jump to the NFL. I'm curious how, your mindset there going from college to the pros.
There was always Coach DeBerry at the time, my head coach at Air Force and the guy I coached for, had a really good, close relationship with the owner of the Broncos. So we went up there during the offseason, kind of this time period right now. And I got to sit in on the meetings, all that stuff. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting in that meeting room and I honestly was like, I can't do this. I never played in the NFL and coached, had no ties to the NFL, but I was like, it's football.
Yeah.
I think I can do this. Isn't much different than what I'm doing at Air Force. Obviously, the system I'm running is different. So
Right.
it kind of always had in the back of my mind that, hey, maybe that's something I could get into and do it. But it's one of the sayings we have in the NFL is it's harder to get into the NFL than it is to stay in the NFL. And it is. I mean, there's only 32 teams. There's only 32 running back coaches, so that piece it's very competitive. It's, the who who knows your work, those type of things. And, a couple opportunities here and there that came up. Another story, of course. So
Yeah.
the Bill Walsh Minority Fellowship they have, I had tried for multiple years to get on. I knew a couple people in the NFL and didn't. So I had a friend at the Colts that I tried to get on there. So, and I still remember, I still have the rejection letter from Chuck Pagano just saying, hey, appreciate your interest, but no, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, literally the very next year, I'm the running back coach at the Indianapolis Colts. So I couldn't work an internship, but I was able to get a full-time
Under Coach Pagano, right?
Under Coach Pagano. So like everything, that's why I say, hey, you know what? Don't ever give up. I've been told I can't be an intern, but then I was given a job as.
Did you show him that letter, by the way?
I didn't, but I did tell him about that story. I did tell him that, hey, y'all could have had me last year. But no, but that was it. And I mean, just getting a chance to get into the NFL and coaching, you talk about my military background. I think it's a lot of those things have helped me be able to stay, in the NFL for the amount of time that I have. Not that it's come without its bumps and bruises, but
sure,
I think it's a lot of it's been a great ride, and from no wins to being for a lot of tough years. I mean, first year in the NFL, we went 500, and then I didn't have a winning season again until I got to the Eagles. So there's a lot of pruning going on in my life and my coaching, and you get here and you got a chance to make a run at the big one, and hopefully get an opportunity sometime to do it again.
Let me ask you about being an ambassador for Christ, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. So I was talking to a few people. We've talked to Coach Dungy on this show, Tony Dungy. We've had Kirk Cousins, a few other guys who are very vocal about their faith. And I said to them, is there a way to separate your faith when you go out on the field as a coach or as a player? Or is that something you're taking with you? Because the Bible says, in 2 Corinthians 5, I think it is, that we are ambassadors for Christ, right? It means we represent him everywhere we go. How has that been for you to be a representative? Are you, when you're on the field or it's in the middle of a game or even in practice, right? Do you understand like that and kind of take take that seriously enough to carry with you when you're on the field, or kind of say, you know what, that's just that. And when that's done, I'll come back to, trying to be the best representative I can.
No. I mean, I think at the end of the day, coaching is what I do. A follower of Jesus is who I am. And at the end of the day, you don't separate who you are just because of the job or the title that you have. And for me, it becomes that I want people to know just by like my interactions with players, my not using profanity and not just how I can communicate with a player. And I think what happens is when I can communicate and show mutual respect to a person, to another young man, they can and learn and they get better. It just kind of goes to show there's a lot of different ways to achieve something. There's a lot of different ways to get kind of what you're asking for. And I feel like leadership and inspiration and those things are way more important than fear. And I don't never want to be a coach that coaches by fear. I want to be a coach that motivates, that inspires, and shows them. And I want them to know that I'm here to help you become the best you can possibly be. And that doesn't change whether I'm on the football field, whether I'm in the meeting room, whether we're out and about on a trip. I think that becomes real important. I mean, how hypocritical would it be for me to talk a certain way but not live that way? And unfortunately, I've lived that. I've been that guy that was, sitting in church and doing that, but wasn't living that way. So for me, there is no separation. I'm a child of God. That's who I am. And I have my beliefs and, continue to try and read the word every single day and try to be better than I was the day before. And sometimes I get an L, sometimes I get a dub, whichever way it works out, but each day trying to be the best I can be. But there's no separating from that. I'm the same person everywhere, just how I approach things. I always want people to say, man, you know what? He was always respectful. He always treated me right. Man, you know what? He talked about his faith a few times too. Maybe that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is it that I want what he has. And hopefully What I have is Jesus in my life. And
Has
hopefully
that happened? Have those moments happened where you were like, Coach, they were like, Coach, what's going on with you? Like, why are you not this way? Why are you different? Have you had moments where guys come up to you or even a fellow coach and said, what you got going on over there?
well, I mean, it's, they know, I mean, it's, for me, it's the consistency piece.
Yeah.
I'm that same guy every time. And they, young men know that they can come and talk to me and they can come and approach me in that way. And they just, I think, just like I said, people are going to, listen to your actions way more than they're going to listen to your words. So
Mm,
I'm trying to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And it helps, I think, young men. I've had other, the players that talk about their faith too. And that, to me, that's a huge part when you're sitting one-on-one with a guy and he's talking about, his faith journey, and you
yeah.
can give them information about that. Again, I'm trying to help build young men. People think, oh, you're in the NFL. These grown men, they got family. I mean, especially in the running back room, I got guys that are 21, 22 years old that left college early. They're still young. They're still trying to figure out their lives. Me at 21, come on, it's the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just helping these guys that, sometimes they get put on a pedestal and they're different and they can't live a normal life. Sometimes they can't go out to the restaurant because they'll get, bombarded with fans and all that stuff. So they're fighting a whole different type of battle that maybe
Mm,
I, like myself, didn't have to experience.
yeah.
But any information I can do to help them, that's beyond football. At the end of the day, it's beyond football.
One of the guys we talked to at the Super Bowl who I was so impressed with was Boston Scott. And I know he's back, and I could not get over. I was so impressed with not just how strong his faith was, but how poised he was. And I'm thinking, as I'm talking to you, I'm like, I can see a reflection a little bit of a younger version of you. I don't know if you see that, but what an impressive young man that guy is.
Oh, he is. I mean, and how do you not love Boston Scott? I don't care. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
And it is, he's a man of faith and growing, and he's navigating his way, and his journey hasn't always been just how he's been an underdog. He's been counted out, and he
Mhm.
just continues to work and continues to fight and continues to follow his faith. So no, it's awesome having him in the room, and having conversations at times that go well beyond football, and that's
Yes.
part of it. And that's what makes this job fun. It's so much more than just football. It's so much more than just X's and O's on the football field. Just the amount of time that we spend and can spend and build relationships with our players is the best part of coaching.
As we wind down, what you just said there might lead into the answer for my next question, but the expectations of a team that goes to the Super Bowl the next year is always the highest, right? And it's like, all right, we got to get back. And the only way we can get better ultimately is to win the Super Bowl. How do you stay humble, right? I mean, we talk about that. That word humility is mentioned a lot in scripture. It's also mentioned a lot in the sports space. So how do you stay humble? How do you keep your players humble with all the expectations that come, the way of the Philadelphia Eagles, as they should, right? Because you guys had such a great year last year, and obviously the offseason has been pretty good too. Lots of great picks in the draft. How do you stay humble and keep your players humble and eyes on the prize at the same time?
It really, you go back to what got you there the first time. And you didn't get
Yeah.
there the first time by just not showing up for work because we got good players, we got that. It's a daily step. It's your walk in faith. It's a daily thing that you have to do. So we can sit here and talk about how great we are, but if you don't put the work in, the NFL is a humbling place. And you
Yes.
can find that real quick and there's so many different examples of
Well,
that.
look at the Rams, right? I'll just say that from last year to the year before, the
It's
Rams.
it
Yeah.
is, and a year in, you talk even as coaching staff, coaches that were in the Super Bowl 2 years later, they're out
Yes.
of a job. It's not, and it goes back really, as I was talking about with your walk. You have to show up every single day, and there's a step-by-step process every single day, every single game
Mm,
leading up to that. Because when you seriously look back at the work that you did to get there the first time, you've got to do it again, but even more. Because at the end of the day, you mentioned it, we didn't finish. We didn't get the win. So there's obviously room for improvement,
yep.
obviously room that we have to do it. And I think the guys that aren't humble, they get humbled real quick because it only takes one play, one game, something like
Yeah.
that. But it's just focusing on today. Let tomorrow be tomorrow. We'll get there, but let's focus on today. What can we do to get 1% better today? What can we do to help our team win down the road? But if you start looking for it, and I know it's a cliche, But
No,
you
but
have
it's
it's
real,
one
right?
game at a
Yeah.
time. It's one day at a time. It's
Yeah.
all of that. And as soon as you start looking past those things that you need to get done right in front of you got no chance. Not in this league.
Yeah, that's great and very well said by Jemal Singleton from the Eagles. Let me ask you the last question here. It's kind of a question we've been asking a lot lately to many of our guests. Gratitude, right? And being thankful. I think that's a great trait to have. You know, Paul talks about that a lot in the epistles in the New Testament. But for you, Jemal Singleton, what are you most thankful for when you think about where God has you today and where you are in your life?
I I don't even know where to begin. I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm at a point now where I don't deserve the blessing I've gotten. Like I just truly feel like, I've got a great marriage. I've got a great daughter. I've got an older daughter as well that's out there too. That's dealing with life. I've got a nice place to live. I've got a good job. I love where I work. There's so many things that I'm so thankful for. And you kind of bring that up. It's, the gratitude. That was one of the things probably in my faith that was the biggest. And I don't know if this is happening, but the tithe, like the tithe was you talk about when I was younger, how I fought that, like, so that's Old Testament. Oh, that's not true. He's not 10. I give 10% of my time. And I had a million excuses
Yeah.
of how I was going to handle my finances and why I didn't have to do that. And it's when the change in my life, it's funny. It's like my career got better when I did something simple. And you think about it, and it's like, you look at the Bible. What is the one thing he says? Test me on it. Go ahead. Try. Go ahead.
Yep.
Well, I did. I tested him on it. And I started being faithful in my tithe. And I started, being generous and showing gratitude for what God has given me. When I finally came to the point that, you know what? It's not mine.
Right.
When I found out that none of it is mine. So why can't I give 10% of my income to the person who at the end of the day gave it all to me? He's asking for 10. I can keep the 90 and I can still keep that. So when you talk about the blessings, it feels like just where I went, the more I was faithful in my tithe, the more I was faithful in my giving to others, it really did. I felt like my prosperity has gotten better because of that. Didn't start out that way because, man, I got a tithe. I didn't have a giving heart, but I was trying to do it. When I finally learned that, you know what? This isn't mine. This is his. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Please take 10%. I'm going to give you more than that.
That's right.
I think that's when really just so many things to be thankful for. But I feel like that's a big part of it when I started to truly give and have a giving heart and give to the Lord what he told me I should give to the Lord. And again, being more of a doer of the word, not just a reader of the word. I took that to heart and continue to do that this day. And, it's something that has changed my life. It really has. I started tithing not when I was where I am financially now, but I've continued to do that. And it's like you say, it's amazing what he does with that 10% that you give, the 90, how he blesses what you have. I can't thank him enough for just giving me that guidance, giving me still knowing like, hey, you're not doing this right. Hey, you're not doing this right. And for me to finally listen and become a doer of the word, I just can't be thankful enough.
Well, that's a great way to finish as we come full circle. That was the first answer. And the last answer is, man, being a doer of the word and not just a hearer. Really good stuff here, Jemal. Thanks for coming back on the show. Really appreciate it. Glad we got to spend a little more time and get to hear your story. And hopefully maybe I'll get down to a game this year and come down and see you guys. I'm in Connecticut, so maybe I'll come down and watch you guys play a game. And but either way, all the best to you. And maybe I'll see you next year at the Super Bowl. Who knows?
Awesome. Thank you. And beyond, thank you guys for what you do. I mean, for Sports Spectrum, just the fact that you put it out there that for people to see that, look, there's coaches in the NFL, there's players in the NFL that are walking in their faith. I texted my wife and I texted my pastor, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
At the draft, the first 3 draft picks mentioned the Lord and they talked about the Lord in it. And it's like faith is there. People are there, and you're not alone. If you think that you're the only, you're not. There's people in every walk of life that are walking this walk with the Lord just the same as you. And you guys do a phenomenal job of bringing those people to the forefront. Say, look, you want somebody to highlight, you want to look at somebody that can kind of show you how to do it. Hey, this person's in the NFL and they believe in the Lord. Hey, this person's in this realm and they believe in the Lord. So to be honest, thank you, because I watch it and I get motivated when I see other coaches and other followers of Christ share the word, and they still have a love for their sport as well. So thank you guys. It's awesome what y'all are doing. And I'm just thankful to be a part of it.
Thanks, my man. I appreciate that, because I tell you, I've been doing this 6 years since I left ESPN, and I never thought we would have 6 years worth of people to talk to, if I'm being honest. I thought, we're going to run out of guys. How many players or coaches are there really out there? And the more we have guests on our show, the more people that kind of come into, I don't know. It's just amazing what God will do when you're faithful, right? You try to be doers of the word. That's really what we're trying to do as well, and just highlight people like yourself and others who are living for the Lord. So thanks again, my friend. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for watching today on Sports Spectrum. Make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos. And if you want more stories on sports and faith, check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.